No.
All right.
So, you sent me the proposition you want to debate in DMs. Just to make sure I've got it right. It's exclusive individual ownership, determined by the first comer principle, is not the only valid way of avoiding conflict.
That is correct.
Cool. So what would you say is the alternative way of avoiding conflict? If you're saying this isn't the only way.
So I'd say one alternative is just to have a set of rules that the involved parties agree to for resolving any sort of difference in desire of use. So there's no need for it to just be the one individual. You could have multiple people essentially just deciding how they resolve that.
Hold on. Apparently I've got an echo problem.
Oh, really?
The fuck? Which person are you hearing echo? Is it my mic or Lego's mic? Okay, well, Stream says he doesn't hear an echo, so I guess debate anything is just incorrect. They may have it open in multiple tabs or whatever. So yeah, with set of rules that the parties agree to, how do you go about? Can these just be any arbitrary rules? Like, and then it's equally as valid as avoiding conflicts? Or does it have to be based upon property rights?
They'd be arbitrary in the sense that the parties involved are, these are the rules that they agree to. I don't know if that sort of being arbitrary is really important. I don't know if it's even meaningful to call that arbitrary. It's just whatever they agree to.
Right,
what would you say qualifies as conflict avoidance?
Conflict avoidance just means you're literally avoiding conflicts. So if the rules, the only way that this is different than the non-aggression principle, is that if it would allow for rules which are aggressive, right? Like if I could come up with a rule that says
for rules that are,
yeah, like if I came up with a rule set which said that I'm allowed to murder you, right? That would be a certain rule set which you could come up with for law, but it wouldn't avoid conflicts, right?
Right. Well, the point of this is that the parties involved are agreeing a set of rules to resolve any sort of conflict. So conflict avoidance, in any meaningful sense, as far as I can tell, is just the resolution of conflict or a way of determining a clear outcome. Like, you can't avoid there being differing desires. No system is going to avoid that. So if by conflict you just mean that two people want to do mutually exclusive actions, you can't avoid that in any system. So conflict avoidance, I'd say, is a bit of a misnomer. It's really just resolution of conflict.
I mean, the opposition says avoiding conflict.
Yeah, I know. I understand that that's the terminology used, so we use that in the proposition. But even in your, there's going to be differences in desire. Like, you can't avoid that sort of conflict in any system where there's going to be two people that want to have different mutually exclusive uses of a piece of property.
Right. So two people just wanting different things to be done, that isn't on the level of conflict until they actually, go about and try and go through with their plan. But sort of, moreover, if they are agreeing, right, then you still have a property system. Whatever if their rule set is consistent with the NAP, right, which means that it doesn't allow for aggression, then your rule set is still going to imply exclusive individual ownership, determined by the first comer principle. If it was determined by a latecomer principle, then you have aggression. If it's collective ownership, then you can't avoid conflicts anymore. So it's still going to have, like, okay, within this conflict, we look at our big contract that we've got drawn up, and it says that person A should win. Okay, well then that means that A has the property right, and so on and so forth. Right, so you still have individual property rights, no matter how complicated this contract might get.
Well, in the case of what I'm proposing, you wouldn't have any clear, like, this one person always. You'd have clear ways of determining who wins if there is a disagreement among co-owners. But you would have multiple owners with no one individual having exclusive control or a right to exclusive control or a right to determine the outcome.
Right, it's not possible to have multiple owners, because what if literally everybody who has agreed to this contract, they all disagree about what is to be done with the stick or whatever? It's going to come out that, somebody is going to win this big set of conflicts with all these different conflicts going on, right? Somebody under our legal theory has to be said that, okay, he's the one who's allowed to do what he wants. That means that he owns it under these circumstances. Now, it might be that under different circumstances, title is transferred to somebody else. That doesn't negate the thesis that there still is exclusive individual ownership.
In the case of what I'm proposing, there wouldn't be any particular individual name that would have that control. It would just be those who follow the agreement have that sort of control. So it could be any one of the co-owners who break the agreement. And if in the case of them breaking the agreement, then their action would be unjustified. But there's no single individual named as the owner who has exclusive rights. So you could have multiple people. So let's say you had 4 people, and 2 of them want to do. Let's just say that 2 people wanted to paint the house yellow, and 2 people wanted to paint the house blue. They can't come to an agreement. So the ones that wanted to say paint the house blue, they say, well, we can't come to an agreement, so we're not gonna take any action. And the 2 that want to paint it yellow say, well, no, we're going to paint it yellow anyway. Well, if they already have as part of their agreement that there has to be a majority vote on what action taken, the 2 that decided to just unilaterally paint the house yellow, they would be in the wrong. Their action would be unjustified. And the 2 people who wanted it to, essentially nothing. Well, they wanted it to be yellow, but they couldn't get the majority vote, so no action taken on their part. Those 2 people would, in a sense, be the winners, or the ones who acted justly, and the 2 people that went ahead and painted the house, they'd be unjust. But even in this case, you have 2 owners. Really, you have 4 owners. It's just that there's 2 of them that are acting unjustified.
Okay, so is it your claim that each one of these 4 people, that they all own the house? So Jimmy owns the house, Bob owns the house, Sarah owns yada yada yada. All of these people, are you saying, own this house?
Yeah.
Okay, so then there is this conflict. A wants to paint it yellow. B doesn't want this to happen. They put it to a vote, and the vote says, don't paint it yellow. So that means that A isn't allowed to paint the house, right?
Well, you have A wanting to paint it yellow and B wanting to paint it blue. And there's no agreement they can reach on what to do, so no action is taken because there's no majority vote reached on what color to paint the house. So no one is really getting the. Go ahead.
It would simplify the scenario if it's just the negation. So A wants to paint it yellow and B doesn't want it to happen, because otherwise we have 2 conflicts at the same time. One person wants it to be painted yellow, the other person doesn't want this to happen, and a further conflict on top of that, which is one person wants it painted blue, the other guy doesn't want that to happen.
Well, let's just stick to the original hypothetical of 2 want to paint it blue, 2 want to paint it yellow. This is a realistic, or this is not outlandish for you to have.
Okay, then let's table that one, and I've got a new question for you, and it's, what if A wants to paint the house yellow, and B doesn't want this to happen?
Are we still talking about 4 people? You said it's a new hypothetical. So
Yeah, 4 people.
What's the content here? But...
Yeah, 4 people.
Okay, so
they all own this house. A wants to paint it yellow. B doesn't want this to happen. C and D agree with B. All right. Is A allowed to paint the house?
Are we assuming the rules are still you have to have a majority vote?
Yeah.
If the rules are you have to have a majority vote, then no, they couldn't make a unilateral decision to paint the house.
Okay, so A doesn't have the right to control the house then. Is that correct?
They don't have the right to make unilateral control and veto or supersede the other owner. So in contrast to the rules they agreed to, no.
Okay.
They have to stick to their agreement.
But at the head, we assumed that A owns this house. Did we not?
Yeah, they do. They
Okay.
do own the house.
But
Well, partially. They're not sole owners. They're one of the owners.
But what it means to own something is that you have the right to control it, right? But A doesn't have the right to control it.
No, they just... Go ahead, sorry, I didn't...
So if A doesn't have the right to control it, which he doesn't in this situation, then he doesn't own it, because the right to control is a synonym for ownership.
No, there's no reason that exclusive unilateral control, that's not necessary for it to be ownership.
Well, I didn't assume
that's your
that.
position that's what's necessary. Clear,
I didn't
say you assumed it. I just said it's not necessary.
I didn't define it in there. I didn't do anything like that, right?
Well, you did. You just said it's synonymous. Hold on. You're defining.
I said it's synonymous with the right to control. I didn't say the exclusive, singular right to control. I said ownership is the right to control, right? And if we have it, that ownership is the right to control, A doesn't have the right to control this thing, then A doesn't own it.
They have some portion of control here. They don't have to have unilateral set. It's not part of the definition that they have unilateral control. They just need some control.
Would you agree that it's either the case that A has the right to control it, or this isn't the case?
I would agree that, yeah, I would agree with that, but I don't agree that that's
okay. So
we should define ownership or the proper concept of ownership.
Okay, so it's either the case that A has the right to control this house, or he doesn't have the right to control this house. Does A have the right to control this house?
Not unilaterally, no. They have some control, but not unilateral.
It's either a true or false, right? We already agreed on that. So, does he have the right to control the house?
Well, when you say the right to control, do you mean unilateral control?
I'm not baking in any sorts of assumptions about unilateralability here, right? I'm just asking whether or not A has the right to control the house.
He does have some control.
He wants to do something with the house.
He does have some control, yeah.
Okay. If A has the right to control the house, that means he's allowed to paint the house, no?
Some control over the house. No. He has some control. He doesn't have unilateral control. I don't know why you're ignoring that distinction.
Well, because we haven't yet derived that control is unilateral or anything like that yet, right? We haven't derived that yet.
Right, so but why are you?
I'm just trying to
deliberately vague when you say control, and I'm asking, do you mean some or unilateral? And you're like, well, I don't want to say. And it's like, well, it's important. It's critical to the conversation we're having, so it's probably important that you do say.
I think a right to control is a binary, and you seem to agree with me before, where you said it's either the case that somebody has the right to control, or they don't have the right to control. That's a binary system there, right? If I
you can have some control, though. You can have some control without having unilateral control.
That's a distinct claim than the right to control.
Yeah, it is.
Right, so
right, I'm talking about that you can have some control as opposed to having unilateral control.
I'm talking about the right to control, not the actual exercising of control.
Yeah, they would have a right of some portion of control depending on their portion of ownership. They don't have unilateral.
What specific portion? Like, if I'm going out into this house and I'm looking at it, is it that A owns like a quarter of it? And it's like, okay, so that's A's property right there. It's this specific object. Like, can I see, if I look at the house, can I see what about it he owns?
No, you can't see it. Ownership is not something that you see. In this case, it would be, if we're just sticking with the same hypothetical, he has a vote.
Right, but then who owns the house?
All four of them own the house. What's the contradiction with all four of them owning the house?
The contradiction is that ownership means the right to control. Okay? It doesn't mean the right to vote. It doesn't mean the right to ask kindly. It doesn't mean the right to flip a coin. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means the right to control. Either you have the right to control something, or you don't have the right to control it. Right? If I have the right to control, if I have the right to control something, that means I can control it, as you'd expect. I can do what I want with it. I'm allowed to decide what happens with it. That is what it means to have a right to control. Now, you can't this isn't a bundle, right? This isn't a bundle of different possible potentials that this thing has, right? Because a potential doesn't actually exist yet. It's a potential, right? The thing hasn't actually happened. I can't own the painting yellowness of a thing because there isn't a painting yellowness that I can strip off from it and sell off or whatever, right? I either control it or I don't control it. The actual object in nature. Either I have the right to control it or I don't have the right to control it. I don't have it that I have the right to control fucking how the electrons are spinning or something like that, right? Either I have the right to control
right,
it,
but you
or I don't.
you said that ownership does not have to be lateral. You said that is not being
Well,
baked into your definition.
I didn't bake it in.
Having
right?
some portion of you haven't baked it in. So if you want to posit that, you can. But as it stands now, having some portion of control does meet the definition of ownership because it is some control. It is control. And we're not baking in whether it's some or unilateral according to, so some control is ownership.
What does it actually mean to have a right to control some of something? What specifically does that mean? Does it mean that I can control, if we consider the house as a whole, I own the basement or something, right? Is that what you're meaning? Or are you meaning we have like these stripped off rights from the object and we are then selling these off individually to different people?
No, that's not what I mean at all. I mean that they have, in the case of the hypothetical discussing, they have a vote. That is control. That's a portion of control over this thing. Their vote.
Right, but how do we actually come into that situation? How, from first principles, presumably somebody built this house. Let's say A built the house, right? He initially built the house. Then he wants to go into this arrangement with his buddies B, C, and D. How, under this situation, does he actually achieve that group ownership? What does he actually do?
He can sell a right to vote. So like in the case of
what is a right to vote? I've never found one of those. I didn't find a right to vote tree. I've not seen one of those before. What does it mean to sell a right to vote?
We can sell them we can just say then, if you don't want to use the word right, we can say they're selling the entitlement to a vote here. We're selling them partial ownership, which gives them entitlement to a vote, which gives them control over the property, which qualifies them as an owner.
I have never in my life looked out my window and seen an entitlement to vote. How? Because
you don't need to see it.
On a first principles understanding of property, right? The way we get to selling something is A wants to sell something to B. So A abandons it at the same time that B takes up control of it. How can I abandon specifically the entitlement to vote on the color of a house? How can I do that?
They're not abandoning it. They still have.
Okay, then how do you justify the selling? So how do you justify that the selling is valid?
You don't have to abandon something. Sell a partial control of it. You don't have to abandon all control over it to do that.
Then what is your first principles derivation of contract theory? How is it that A is able to sell a stick to B?
They have a consent. They have an agreement. Essentially, they both consent to the arrangement.
Okay, they both consent. I can agree there, but why does that imply? That they can sell?
I'll just give you a real life example. So me and my wife both built a house together. We're both owners of this house. According to you, who owns the house?
One of you or neither of you?
So which one? So I'm giving you, you can ask whatever questions you need, I guess, to determine who's the owner, but we both bought it together. We paid for it out of a shared account.
Then
we had the house built.
Then the person.
So according to you, is the real owner of this house?
Then it's the person who you were playing law with and pretensies bought it from with you and your wife because that contract's invalid.
Oh, it's not pretend.
It's very much pretensies, and this is my entire point. So.
No, it's not pretensies. You're just positing that it's a baseless assertion.
It's not baseless. I've been giving you the basis for it this entire debate.
It is baseless. So we own the house.
What is the first principles?
Wait. Real quick. Let's not deviate from the hypothetical. So according to you, we don't own the house. So according to you, someone else, we didn't buy the house for anyone. We had the house built. So who owns the house?
Presumably the construction company, whoever runs that construction firm, he owns it. Because
so according to
he
you,
built it, right?
Any couple that buys a house. So according to you, any couple that builds a house and pays for it together, everywhere in the U.S., the construction company it would be within their rights. They would be morally justified to come and remove those people who paid them to build the house and moved into the house and went through all the proper procedures as far as socially what we recognize. Your position is that that construction company would be right to come and remove.
If they give the money back, yes, assuming they haven't like gone bust and like abandoned it or something.
Why would they have to give the money back? You said they're the owner, right? Why do they have to give the money back?
Hold on. Because it wasn't a valid contract on the outset. So both sides of the contract are invalid. The payment and...
Why isn't it valid?
Because a group property right implies a contradiction, which brings us back to the topic of discussion. Thank you very much.
What's the contradiction?
So your assertion for how you get to a group property right is that you're selling off an entitlement to vote. What I asked you was, what is the first principles derivation of how exactly you sell off a right to vote? How is it that A transfers, and you said it had nothing to do with abandonment, right? Okay, so you're not abandoning the right to vote. How is it then that A can transfer title of a stick to B? How does that occur?
Okay, so I'll just stick to the example of me and my wife. We both paid for this house together. Why, what is the contradiction with the construction company who never had title of the home?
How about you stick to the example I asked you?
It doesn't make sense.
Why are you answering a question I didn't ask you?
We might as well... No, I'm going to use a real world... You didn't really give a lot of content, so I'm just going to stick to a real world example here. We don't even need a hypothetical.
Well, I can tell you what...
title being...
I can tell you what I'm going to answer it because I already answered that question, right? The answer is that the contract's invalid because group property rights imply a contradiction. Right? And I've explained the contradiction. And the way you're trying to get out of the contradiction is that you have a different theory of how sales work.
You haven't given a contradiction.
You have a
right, which is wait.
You have
the whole point of this. No, the point of this discussion is that I'm giving you an alternative, and you're supposed to tell me the contradiction.
And I'm interrogating. I'm trying to interrogate your alternative. I literally am.
No, you're trying to give me a different alternative.
Oh my god! I'm trying to hold on.
No, engage with the hypothetical.
I'm trying to. You have a different property theory. You have a different contract theory. Okay.
Right, so engage with
hold on. That's what I'm fucking trying to do, you retard.
No, you're not.
Okay.
No, you're trying to go back to your theory.
Let me answer.
Well, it contradicts with my theory, so therefore contradiction.
Let me answer.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
So,
but engage with what I'm giving you.
Okay, I'm going to mute you if you keep this up.
You're going to mute me?
Okay, you're muted now. Okay, so what we have here is that you have a different contract theory, right? The way you're getting out of the contradiction is you say, no, what they're doing is they're just selling the entitlement to vote. That you don't have to have this theory of A abandons it at the same time that B takes it up. Okay, so this is going to be some sort of different contract theory. I'm asking you, what is that contract theory? How is it, in the very simple case, that A transfers title of a stick to B? That's what I want to know.
All right, two people purchase a thing from a guy. What's the contradiction in him transferring title to those two people?
I did not appreciate an answer in there. Could you just answer the question?
Right, I'm giving you an alternative concept of ownership.
I'm trying to fucking interrogate that alternative. I'm trying to interrogate that, and you're not answering me.
No, I'm giving you an alternative. No, you're changing the concept of ownership to be a different one that you can try to poke holes in.
I'm asking you for your contract theory, and you're not giving it to me.
Hypothetical as given.
I'm asking you for your contract theory, and you refuse to give it.
Okay, the contract theory here is that both parties, me and my wife, consent to the purchase. The person selling us the property consents to the purchase. They therefore transfer title to the both of us. What's the contradiction?
Okay. Hold on. How is it that both consenting, A and B, both consent to the transfer of the title of the stick? Okay. From that, how do we establish that title to the stick transfers?
Do you establish that it transfers? They sign the paper, we sign it. That established.
But why does that imply that that title to the stick has transferred?
Because they've relinquished ownership to us per the agreement. We've given them what was demanded within the agreement. both parties are consenting, me and my wife plus the seller, transfer is completed.
Okay, what if me and you, we both agreed that we will come up with a new property arrangement. I am going to sell you my beer and not sell you my beer. We both shake hands on it, we both agree. Okay. That's a contradiction, right?
Why are you changing? Engage with the hypothetical.
Fucking
What's
hell.
the contradiction in what I'm
Have you never been in a conversation
Engage
before?
with the hypothetical.
Have you never been in a conversation
Engage
before?
with the hypothetical.
I'm trying to explain.
Why do you keep changing?
I'm trying to. I'm interrogating this. I'm interrogating this. Hold on.
No, you're not.
I'm interrogating.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Let's change it.
Hold on.
Because I can't.
Okay, you're muted now. I'm interrogating this notion that, well, they both consented to it, so therefore it's fine. That the titles do indeed transfer because they both consented to it. All right, we both consented to the arrangement that you own my beer and you don't own my beer. We both consented to it, but surely that doesn't imply that this is a valid property arrangement. That's what I'm getting at. That just because they agreed does not make it a valid property arrangement.
Cool. Now engage with the idea that me and my wife buy a house from a guy who transfers us ownership. What's the contradiction there?
Because you can't have a group property right. Because you can't avoid conflicts. It means that both A owns it and A doesn't own it. You've heard this argument a million times before, Lego.
No, we both
and
own
the way,
it. Well,
and,
tell me the
right, and the way you tried to get out of this was by coming up with a new contract theory.
I'm not trying to get out of it.
Your contract theory is both consented, so therefore the contract is valid. Okay, but we both consented that you own my beer and you don't own my beer. That doesn't make it a valid contract because it's a contradiction.
You're trying to change it again.
What am I changing?
My wife buy a house from a guy. He transfers us.
Hell. All right, okay, we're done here. Jesus fucking Christ.